The iPad Air 6 just came out, but more than likely the Air 5 from 2022 is the one you should actually get. To this day, it has excellent performance from the M1 chip and 8GB of RAM, the latest design language with symmetrical bezels and flat sides, and the latest version of iPadOS that'll get updates for years into the future. You get all that with an iPad that goes for as low as $400 used these days. I think it's high time I formally revisited the 5th gen iPad Air to break down what all it offers in 2024. Starting with performance, the Air 5 is powered by the M1 chip and doubled RAM from the previous model at 8GB. Performance is excellent to this day. The M1 chip can do just about anything you'd want to do on an iPad, and the 8GB of RAM help solve the issue of apps dying off in the background that the 3rd and 4th gen Airs had. I just couldn't get this iPad to struggle with my regular tasks of web browsing, taking notes, photo editing, and consuming media. But full transparency, when this model came out, I called the performance upgrades overkill because at the time, Apple put the M1 chip in the latest Macs and iPad Pros. But as time passed, the M2 iPad Pro came out, M3 MacBooks came out, and this M1 iPad Air became a more reasonable device. Also, the new iPad Air 6 with the M2 chip helps put things into perspective as now it's the one with overkill performance. The new 6th gen Air also has the same 8GB of RAM as the previous model. Back to the M1 iPad Air, the only caveat to great performance is the refresh rate, where the iPad Pros with 120Hz screens will feel snappier when jumping around the UI. But putting that aside, the iPad Air 5 has top-of-the-line performance at its cheapest price yet in 2024. Getting into software, the 5th gen Air runs iPadOS 17, the latest version of the OS right now. And this iPad will keep running the latest version for a while, as if we assume 7 years of total support, that'd bring us to early 2029 before it stops getting updates. iPadOS as a software experience is a clean and familiar UI paired with a lot of functionality that complements iPads well. Things like Apple Pencil integration and split screens or floating windows for multitasking are iPad-only features that equip iPads for a lot of different types of work. For multitasking, you can even combine split screen and floating windows for a 3-app experience if you're a multitasking pro. There are certain features I hear people say they wish would be added to iPadOS, like multiple user accounts or advanced file management, but I think most people are happy with the feature set right now, especially people that are willing to buy an iPad from 2022 like this Air 5. But overall, iPadOS is good software in both form and function that works very well on this iPad. Talking about design, the Air 5 copied and pasted the design overhaul from the 4th gen Air. It's a clean design with flat sides and symmetrical bezels that's up to date with Apple's current design motif, including the new Air 6. This iPad has the exact same screen-to-body ratio and screen size at 10.9 inches as the 4th gen Air and the smaller Air 6. Speaking of the smaller Air 6, there is a bigger one too, which is a first for the series. It's 2 inches bigger in size at 13 inches with the same pixel density and 600 nits max brightness. Really though, if you need that larger screen size, I'd recommend an older iPad Pro over this new Air for a lower price with some extra features. Delving more into the IPS screen of the Air 5 though, the 264 ppi pixel density keeps things crisp, and the max brightness is 500 nits. Compared to the state of screens in flagship phones and the latest iPad Pros, that is not a very high max brightness. The iPhone 15, for example, maxes out at 2000 nits. But realistically, I'd never use iPads outdoors, so I wouldn't call this a major downside. When indoors, this iPad screen has great colors and contrast. Really, the main downside of the screen is its 60Hz refresh rate, but that's how all iPad Airs are, including the new Air 6, and besides that, this is a great screen in 2024. As for accessories, this iPad supports the 2nd gen Apple Pencil and magnetic cases. Putting aside the Apple Pencil Pro, which really is more so meant for the iPad Pros, these are the latest standards, and this iPad supports just about everything you could do with an Apple Pencil, keyboard, or case. That includes low latency usage of the Apple Pencil with good battery life, plus wireless charging when magnetically attaching the pencil to the iPad. I've said it before, but pairing an iPad with the Apple Pencil and keyboard case is a game changer for productivity. This iPad Air 5 is no exception to that. The last thing I'll say as I round out this section is if you find your budget tightening up after getting this iPad Air but still want an Apple Pencil, get a cheap clone. They do basically everything an Apple Pencil does, and some models even charge and connect wirelessly. They're also cheap enough at around $20 a piece that you won't feel bad if you lose or break them. Overall, there's all the accessory support you'd need with the iPad Air 5. As for cameras, the 5th gen iPad Air has a 12 megapixel f1.8 lens on the back that was carried over from the previous generation. If we're being honest with each other, it'll only be used to take photos of documents and maybe the board in class, which is likely why Apple didn't think it was necessary to upgrade it. For the small list of iPad camera uses, this camera will be just fine. You're not going to want to do much else with it though, and it's definitely worse than the camera on the phone in your pocket. The front camera on here was upgraded over the 4th gen Air, and it's 12 megapixels with a new ultra-wide angle. Quality-wise, there wasn't too much of a step up, with the main change being supporting center stage. That's a feature that automatically crops into the camera feed to keep faces centered. I suppose this could be useful since the main use of an iPad front camera would be video calls and Zoom meetings, but the quality wouldn't lend itself to much more than that. To wrap up the camera section, I'll say the Air 6 kept the camera specs the exact same on the front and back, but it did move the front camera from the short side of the iPad to the long side. Insignificant news to me, as I think this is one of the least important aspects of an iPad, but to the extent you need an iPad camera, the 5th gen Air has you covered in 2024. Getting into unlock methods, the Air 5 has the same fingerprint reader in the top-mounted power button as the previous generation. This is a solid unlock technique, and it's worked effortlessly from my testing. There's no Face ID though, as that's something Apple replaces Touch ID with only on the Pro models. The battery in the 5th gen Air is 7,606 mAh to match the previous generation, and that provides great battery life. All iPad Airs I've used have had great battery life, so I think Apple just has the capacity and optimization down to a science at this point. You'll get excellent battery life for 2024. Finishing things up, I'll mention this iPad originally came in 64GB and 256GB variations. Unless you need a lot of storage, I'd recommend you grab the 64GB model used or refurbished to get the biggest drop in price since this guy came out. For my research, you can get as low as $400 for a used model in good condition. But here's the conclusion. In 2024, the 5th gen iPad Air is still a solid tablet, and since it's only one generation behind the latest model, there's very few drawbacks, and most of them are versus the iPad Pros. iPad Airs are the best fit for most people though, and this one is more affordable than ever. I'll drop links to the cheapest prices I could find this iPad at on Amazon and eBay in the description. Subscribe for more quality general tech and audio tech videos, and I'll see you later.